Become a better botanist by Lily Fullick Learning. Lesson 1. The parts of the flower. A typical flower consists of two sets of organs which are sterile, the sepals and the petals, and two sets of fertile organs, the stamens and the carpels. These are arranged in 4 whorls. They are attached to the receptacle, which is the swollen top of the flower stalk, the pedicel. So here we have the parts of a typical flower. We can see the 4 whorls, the sepals on the outside, then inside that, the petals, next whorl in the stamens, and then in the centre, the carpels. So again, working from the outside in, we have the sepals that are normally green in colour. We have the petals, generally brightly coloured. We have the stamen with its 2 parts, the anther and the filament. And then we have the carpel with the stigma, the style and the ovary. There we have at the base here the receptacle, and then the receptacle is the swollen part at the top of the flower stalk, the peduncle. The sepals together form the calyx. Often these are green and they protect the flower when it's in bud. The petals together form the corolla. They are usually brightly coloured and help to attract insect pollinators. The calyx and the corolla together form the perianth. Sometimes the sepals and petals are similar in appearance and they are then called tepals. The sepals and petals may be separate and free from each other, or the lower parts may be joined to form a tube. There may be spurs from either sepals or petals. Sometimes it's the sepals which are brightly coloured and the petals might be absent or transformed into nectaries. Sometimes petals or sepals are modified to form more complex looking shapes. The flower may be radially symmetrical or have bilateral symmetry, where each side is a mirror image of the other. The male parts of the flower are the stamens, each consisting of an anther and a filament. The anther produces the pollen, and it's attached to the top of a narrow stalk called a filament. The female parts of the flower are the carpels. They are made up of 3 parts. The base is the ovary containing the ovules which will develop into seeds. Then there is a stalk, the style, and at the top of the style is the stigma which receives the pollen. So we have ovary, style, stigma. Many flowers have several carpels. They may be separate, as here, and the flower is then called apocarpus. Or they may be fused together into a single structure, the ovary of the whole flower. The flower is then called syncarpus. There is variation in the shape and form of the receptacle and in where the sepals and petals are attached. There are 3 possible arrangements: the hypogynous flower with a superior ovary, the perigynous flower with a superior ovary, and the epigynous flower with an inferior ovary. So let's just explain those. So the hypogynous flower, the receptacle is convex and the sepals and petals are inserted here around the base of the ovary. Then we have the perigynous flower, this one, with the superior ovary. Here the receptacle is concave and the sepals and petals are attached here at the rim of the receptacle. Then we have the epigynous flower with the inferior ovary. This time the receptacle completely surrounds the ovary and is fused to it. And the sepals and the petals are attached up here at the top of the ovary. Some flowers are unisexual. They either have only stamens, so they're male, or only carpels, so they're female. If male and female flowers are on the same plant, the plant is monoecious. And if they are on separate plants, so some plants are male and some are female, then the plant is dioecious. When plants are classified into families, there are a number of flower characters which are used to do that. This is what they include: the number of sepals, petals, stamens and carpels, whether the flower is apocarpous, that means the carpels are separate, or syncarpous, so they're fused together into the ovary, whether the ovary is superior, so that means that the petals and the sepals are joined below the ovary, or inferior, where they're joined right at the top. Whether the flower is radially symmetrical or bilaterally symmetrical, and whether the sepals and petals are free or whether they're joined into a tube below. So you've now been introduced to the main parts of the flower and seen some of the variation that's possible. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the lesson. Lily Fullick Learning.